Hi, Dirtbike Magazine here, and welcome to the 2020 450 Motocross Shootout. This year we've once again gathered the 6 major contenders in this class. We have the Honda CRF 450R, the Husqvarna FC 450, the Kawasaki KX 450, the KTM 450SXF, the Suzuki RMZ 450, and the Yamaha YZ 450F. This isn't a big year for change for any of these bikes. They're either only lightly changed or they come back with no changes at all. To find out if any of these updates are enough to change the pecking order in the 450 class, we started from scratch, testing all 6 bikes as if we had never seen them before. We installed Dunlop MX33 tires on all of them, then rode 5 different tracks with 10 different riders. When it was all over, we learned that all of the bikes are competitive, but they aren't all the same. It's fair to say that for every rider, there is a right 450 motocross bike and 5 others. Honda did most of its development for the 2020 CRF 450R on a computer screen. The most significant changes are all programming related. The formula has changed on all 3 of the user selectable motor maps. Additionally, there's a new traction control mode with 3 different levels. When you add in the 3 levels of launch control, it's apparent that the Honda can morph its personality in a multitude of ways. Power has always been the Honda's big trump card. That hasn't changed. This year, the bike might even be more powerful. We have to give credit to those men in the front of their computer screens though, because the bike is still reasonably manageable. It's a brute, but it's a controllable one, as long as you treat it with respect. Another strong point for the CRF 450R is comfort and layout. Honda nails it in the ergo department year after year. The bars, the seat, the pegs, they're all in about the right place. Big rider, small rider, everyone agrees the Honda is comfortable. Honda made amazing progress with its mapping changes and the few things that it did to the 2020 model, somehow making the bike faster and easier to control. It still suffers from some of the same faults that have been evident for years, namely a weak clutch, too much weight, and a pro-level disposition, but overall, if you're the right rider for that bike, it's excellent. As for the numbers on the Honda, it weighs 239 pounds without fuel on our scale. Peak horsepower, 56.9. Manufacturer's suggested retail price, $9,399. Husqvarna's relationship with KTM is at once its biggest asset and its weakest point. The Husky 450 motocross bike has benefited from some of the best engineering in the motorcycle world, but year after year it kind of exists in the shadow of the KTM 450 SXF. It's still very light. It's still very powerful. It still has some of the best components in the motorcycle world. Above all, the Husqvarna motor is smooth. It is a silky smooth motor with a lot of power that is delivered very gradually. In the past, riders actually complained about that. They said it felt sleepy off the bottom. Husqvarna addressed that this year by throwing in a vented airbox cover in with every bike. You put that on, the bike gets a little more snap. When you combine that with MAP 2, it actually makes a difference. It's just not a huge difference. There's nothing about the new bike that feels decisively different from the 2019 Husqvarna. For us, that's a good thing. We like the bike. We like the smooth power delivery. If the bike has any fault, it's in the comfort department. The fork is effective, just not plush. The seat is a little hard, and the frame has a very stiff, unyielding feel. Overall, though, the bike is top-notch. It remains a great motorcycle assembled with very high-quality parts. But the world of 450 motocross bikes is very competitive. Manufacturers can rarely afford to stay still for even 1 year. As for the numbers on the Husky, 223 pounds without fuel, peak horsepower is 55.1, and it's the most expensive of the bunch at $10,099. Last year, Kawasaki blew us away with an all-new 2019 KX450. Not only did it have a new motor with electric start, but it had the only hydraulic clutch on a Japanese motocross bike, and significant improvements everywhere. It was the lightest of the 450s from Japan, and one of the best handling motocross bikes ever. Now the 2020 model has arrived without a single mechanical change. We're not sure if that's cockiness or confidence. Still, the Kawasaki handles flawlessly. It kind of reminds us of that classic feel of a 2008 Honda CRF 450R, only now with modern suspension and more power. It's perfectly predictable and well-mannered. The motor kind of adds to that whole personality. It has more low-end power than anything else in the class, making it easy to ride and snappy. We like the 2019 KX450, so naturally we like the 2020 version. Kawasaki's approach to the engineering and production of the KX450 is aggressive, but the bike feels somewhat conservative on the track. It handles, in our collective opinion, in kind of an old-school way, kind of the way a motocross bike should handle. Kawasaki's numbers are 233 pounds without fuel, 53.1 horsepower, $9,299. After what seems like a non-stop barrage of engine redesigns and big rethinks, the 2020 KTM 450 SXF arrives with very few changes. It's more or less a ceasefire from Austria. It still has a single overhead cam valve train with the old school rocker arms, but hydraulically actuated diaphragm spring clutch, steel frame WP suspension, and an exact 48 air fork. All those things are distinctly KTM, and last year the bike got a more compact head, a stiffer frame, and new bodywork. KTM is a cut above most bikes in terms of quality components. The various parts from the clutch to the brakes to the bars to the levers, all extremely high quality. But the best thing about it is the power delivery. It has a lot of power and it has such a gradual hit, many riders assume it's not very fast. It is, but it doesn't yank. It pulls. It got a little heat last year because of that, and that's why KTM gave it a vented airbox cover and kind of beefed up map number 2 to have a little bit more snap. This doesn't really show up on a dyno, but you can feel it. Overall though, still very smooth bike. Some riders still want a harder hit down low. It isn't that they're thrill seekers, but they want to use that extra snap to initiate a turn. Like the Husky, the KTM's biggest weak spot is in the area of comfort. We weren't especially fond of the stiffer frame that arrived in 2019, and it's still there. The suspension might be improved slightly this year, but not enough to really give it a super comfortable feel on the track. KTM has still had more influence in modern motocross design than any other company. This goes beyond its relationship with Husqvarna. It seems like Japanese manufacturers are waiting to see what KTM does next. The 450 SXF remains a cutting-edge motocross bike. This year, once again, it's a mix of a pro-only chassis and kind of an amateur-oriented motor. It has something for everybody, but it doesn't quite have it all. The weight of the KTM, 223 pounds without fuel. Peak horsepower is 55.4. The price is $9,999. The Suzuki RMZ 450 is a bit of a throwback to the previous decade. Many riders love it for that reason. There's a growing number of skeptics who insist that the bikes of the late 00s handle better than modern bikes. 2 years ago, Suzuki redesigned the RMZ 450 and took a chance by leaving off electric start. The Suzuki isn't really offering technology that has changed much since the bike's introduction in 2008. It just benefits from 12 years of evolution. With the Suzuki, you know exactly what you're getting. There's nothing experimental or untested about this bike. Its strongest asset remains overall handling, as it has been for years. It turns with very little rider effort, goes where it's pointed, and is reasonably stable. The motor is smooth and fast enough for everyone short of a legitimate pro. But at the risk of pointing out the obvious, the RMZ is the only one in the test without electric start. That would be fine if it were also the lightest, but it's not. It's the heaviest, if only by 1 pound. And even though the Suzuki banks on its overall handling, it still isn't the best in that department. The fork and shock are a little unbalanced in stock configuration. We know the Suzuki can be made into a great motocross bike for novices and even top-level pros. The JGR team proves that week in and week out. But in stock form, it's an unfinished package. As far as the numbers, the Suzuki weighs 240 pounds without fuel, peak horsepower is 52.8, and the price is the lowest of the bunch, $8,999. Yamaha was the only manufacturer to reinvest heavily in its 450 motocross bike for 2020. The YZ 450F might not look that different, but it has changes in the frame construction, it has a new head, new motor mounts, new brakes, and a long list of other changes. The defining innovation for this bike came in 2018 when the YZ got Mikuni fuel injection system that incorporates Wi-Fi connectivity to any smartphone. With all the changes for 2020, gotta say, the Yamaha has the best motor ever offered in a production motocross bike. It's amazing. It has a ton of power, it's completely manageable. It's so rare that you can combine all these things in one package. The YZ appeals to both pros and beginners. Yamaha also trumps the other bikes in suspension, yet again. In a field where excellence is the norm, the YZ's KYB shock and fork stand out as exceptional. In the past, Yamaha has taken a lot of heat over its handling. Slowly, those complaints have kind of gone away. Some people say it still feels a little clumsy, and most people will agree that the bike feels heavy and handles a little bit better as long as you're on the throttle. It also has kind of odd ergos, but all that is getting closer and closer to mainstream. The Yamaha was once a divisive, controversial motocross bike. The 2020 model has won over many of its detractors with strong points that are overwhelming and undeniable. The old complaints can still be heard, but they grow fainter after each year. As far as numbers go, the Yamaha weighs 239 pounds without fuel, peak horsepower is 56.0, and the price $9,399. So where does that all leave us? After listening to the test riders, mix it in with our own perspective on where these bikes came from and where they're going, we gotta say the conclusion winds up being a contest between the Yamaha and the Kawasaki. It's a classic battle of horsepower versus handling. For us, this year, we're going with the Kawasaki again. It's a bike that makes everybody feel like a better rider, and in the end, that's kind of what we want. If you've missed any of these tests as they showed up individually, click on them now. And as always, go to dirtbikemagazine.com for all the latest in dirt bike news and information.